We are all connected through shared experiences, and while our circumstances may vary, there is almost always a common thread in our stories. I am Amy Seeman, and these are the stories that connect us. Welcome to another episode of A Common Thread podcast. I'm your host, Amy Seeman, and today I have with me Kelly Gulbrandson. Kelly is the Director of Community Relations at Appalatos, and her husband, Chris, is the president and owner. And that's actually how we met. So we met 4 years ago when I was asked to be a part of this just incredible, life-changing initiative here in the Twin Cities called 12 Moms of Christmas. And so essentially what it is a handful of dealerships in the Twin Cities partner with Newgate schools, and they give away 12 vehicles to 12 single moms who are currently without transportation. They have to be working full-time or in school full-time, head of household, and they have to be making less than $35,000 a year. And so I was asked in year 2 to join, and my role, along with many other influencers, is to go out to the community and we collect goods, services, gifts, cash, anything that will help these moms not only create a magical Christmas for their children, but also set them up for success in the new year. So Kelly, tell us about how you guys got involved and kind of how it's grown over the years.
Yeah, we got involved over 5 years ago. So this December will be our 6th year. And every year it keeps getting better and better and bigger and more people get involved. The community keeps giving and wanting to be a part of it. So we got involved originally back when a dealership partner of ours from White Bear Mitsubishi asked us to kind of collaborate and think of a way that we could support Newgate. They do a program called Wheels for Women. Every month they give away a car. They get thousands of applicants from women in need of a car or reliable transportation. And so we said, why don't we do something bigger? So for December, we said, let's do 12 cars and partner with enough dealerships that we can do that. So we give away 12 cars every December. The first year that this happened, you know, it's funny to say, but we just gave away cars, right? And it was amazing. And it was life-changing for all of these women. But after that, we kind of put our heads together and said, what else can we do? It's Christmas time.
Yep.
Like a lot of these moms don't have presents under the tree. And so that's where the idea came to stuff the cars.
Yes.
And so we knew we couldn't do that alone. Yep. Our little, mighty team at Appalatos was like, we gotta find some people in the community. So Amy, that's where we met.
Yep.
And that you came into the story, and we work with a lot of other amazing people in the community that help us do this through a lot of social media activity. And so we now are able to stuff every car with not only gifts for children, gifts for mom, services, gift cards. I mean, it's like an Oprah moment at this time. It really is. It really is. So
it really is.
It's really grown.
And it's so, I mean, if you follow me on social media, I am a weeping mess. All my stories in November, December from the moment it launches, because we get some background on these women. So there are hundreds of applicants. Newgate Schools goes through and they select the moms that meet the criteria. And I do not wish that job on anyone. I feel like it would be so incredibly difficult. And then we get the background on their stories, and man, they just stay with you.
They really do.
And the moms don't know. So they know that they're getting a vehicle.
They know they're getting a vehicle. They don't know what. They don't, know what it's going to look like. They're just, I think, really thankful they're going to have reliable transportation. Because you can imagine.
Yes.
Having children is so hard. But having children without a way to get them around,
I can't.
I can't imagine it. And so, they know they're going to get the car, but they have no idea.
Yeah. And I feel like I live in my vehicle some days, just driving all around. And so, and these women are so resilient.
Yeah.
I mean, the way, when you hear their stories, miles that they walk, they spend so much of their money on Ubers and Lyfts, which is also just really...
Or hours on the bus, right? Like
hours on
whatever
the
it
bus.
is, it's taking away their money and their time to not be able to be there and be alone.
And Newgate Schools is a really incredible program, which I had not even heard of until I got involved in this campaign. Tell us a little bit more about Newgate Schools and what they do.
They're a great program. They're an automotive training school, so that they bring in students that learn how to be auto technicians, and they do that free with free tuition. And so it's a great program for people to learn the industry and get more involved there. So we partner with Newgate in a lot of other ways besides 12 Moms. But this program just, obviously touches our hearts and pulls at all of our heartstrings. And so it's something we do year after year. And are excited to be a part of it. Also, people can donate to Newgate financially, but they can also donate cars. So they take a lot of used cars or older cars, and they take them, and then that's what the students are able to work on and fix up and then provide to a mom.
Yeah.
So it's a really great full circle program.
Absolutely. So if you're in the area and you have a vehicle that is not probably worth much in a trade-in value, that's a great way to donate. And I'm assuming it's a tax.
Yes, it is.
Yep. So this last year, this last December, I just felt like it split me wide open. I was so emotionally impacted by these women's stories. I'm an empath in general, so like I'm always impacted by these stories. But there was something this year, and I think really what it was, and I shared this in my first episode on the podcast, is it ripped me wide open, and I realized so many of these women have stories to tell, and they need a safe place, and I want to help more, and I want to give back more. And so that was sort of just what kind of really pulled me towards doing a podcast.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been wanting to do a podcast for a long time, but this really did. And so as we were talking in the end of December, Kelly and I were, and I was telling her about the podcast. Of course, she was very supportive of it. And so was your husband, Chris. And then I said, I want to take this show on the road. Yeah. So I'm also looking for a sponsor. And I'm so grateful to you and your husband for believing in me and coming along with me as a very key sponsor of the podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's super exciting and exactly the kind of thing Appalachian stands behind. So.
Yeah. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, but you are dreading the car buying process because you've been burned by a dealership in the past, let me just tell you, I recently bought a 2023 Lincoln Aviator Reserve from Appalachian, and I had such an incredibly positive experience. I actually went shopping by myself. I did not bring my dad or my husband with me, and from the moment I walked in, I felt welcomed and respected. They answered all of my questions without any sort of underlying condescending tone. I never once felt pressured into a car that was out of my budget or didn't fit within my lifestyle. In fact, my sales associate was actually a female, and we went for so many test drives, we totally vibed the entire time. If you're ready to experience the difference for yourself, go to appalachians.com to view their inventory and then visit one of their 7 locations across the Twin Cities. Trust me, you will leave feeling empowered and ready for the road ahead. It's been great to do a lot in the community. I love it. And then as Kelly and I got to know each other better, we did do a shopping spree.
Yes.
She's got this gorgeous
dress.
dress.
I probably would have walked right by.
Yeah.
That I live in now. So
it's great. So we got to know each other on a personal level. And as we were shopping and we were talking about motherhood, Kelly has a very unique situation with one of her sons. And so I asked her to be on because I think that this is a topic that many can relate to or maybe you're not aware of. And I know it's going to be really impactful. So Kelly, tell me about your 2 sons, and then we'll focus on Asher and his diagnosis.
Yeah, I have 2 sons, Hunter, who's 9, and Asher, who is 6. Asher has a really complicated medical history. Hunter has, his own stuff too. He's not the one without anything. So I feel like I've had to dive into a lot of different things throughout my motherhood journey. They're both awesome kids with so much love and so much passion for things. So it's amazing, but it's been complex and hard.
Yep. So Asher was diagnosed with PANDAS. Is that correct?
PANS. So PANS
Okay,
is PANS is Pediatric Acute-onset Neuropsychiatric Syndrome. And PANDAS is under the umbrella of PANS, and it's when it's specific to strep. So you'll hear those both kind of thrown around. Yeah. PANS is a little wider of a diagnosis, and PANDAS is when the trigger seems to specifically be strep.
Okay.
So similar. Kids both can have strep and have it cause issues.
Yeah.
Asher specifically was diagnosed with something called PANS, which is the Pediatric Acute-onset Neuropsychiatric.
And when was that?
Disorder or syndrome. That was in 2022. He was diagnosed with that. And prior to that, when he was 9 months old, he was diagnosed after a really long hospital stay with something called CGD, which is chronic granulomatous disease. So something that is incredibly rare.
Okay.
And so basically what that is when your body can't fight bacterial and fungal infections quite the same as somebody with a full immune system. So that was really terrifying. Yeah. When you find that, it's kind of like a bubble boy, right? You can't go outside. You can't be by mulch. You can't be by sand. You can't be by grass. The world is danger, it felt like at that time. So he was diagnosed as a baby with that. And that was really, really terrifying. Part of the treatment for that is antibiotics as a prophylactic. And there's a wide range of other medications that he was on throughout the course of trying to treat that. In the meantime, like after being a year old, he went through, lots of ups and downs and had a couple other minor infections, but never anything quite as severe as the first time. And we started going to the Mayo. We went to NIH. We had him kind of studied everywhere because he didn't really seem like a typical kid with this.
Okay.
And it was kind of this question of like, does he have this? Does he not? And so we went through genetic testing of my entire family, ruled out a lot of things. They're still studying him to this day. And that was, over 5 years ago. So at this point, it's like he has a mild case of it. And so we're like, okay, that's great. Like maybe he can do a few more things. Like I remember the time we let him swim in the lake for the first time.
Okay.
Because he
How old
wasn't
was
supposed to
he
swim in a lake.
when that-
He was 3.
3. Okay.
And that feeling of like, I'm just going to let you do it. And I don't know if this is the right thing, but it's the right thing right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's listening to your gut.
Yep.
And he was okay. So we continue to kind of like, inch our way into things that he is allowed to do. And he's really living a totally normal life as far as that goes right now.
Good.
So we had like a little window of a break.
Yeah.
COVID happened, which I think we were like, oh, okay, we've kind of been through this. We've had a kid that was kind of in a bubble.
Yeah,
And we got the mask at home and we got the hand sanitizer and all the things. And so that was a little bit like, okay, we can do this. And then he was diagnosed with PANS.
Just
shortly after that.
Or shortly after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In the middle of still masks and everything at school, was when he was diagnosed.
So what were some of the symptoms that then made you say, let's go back and look deeper at what might be going on?
Yeah. It was when you look back, and everybody's story who has a kid with PANS or PANDAS is they're all going to be really different. They're all going to be very specific to that kid, but they're all going to have some similarities, at least in my experience. And so when I look back at it, there was probably several months, I think, after he had a pretty severe infection. And when we kind of look back at the timeline, he had, he got COVID. It was months later, he got RSV. And then a few months later, it was like the full-blown PANS came.
Okay.
And so there's not a trigger that we can like say for sure this was it. But we know that he had illnesses that we think really put his immune system out of whack.
Okay.
And that's really what PANS is when there's a very strong immune response that the body starts attacking itself instead of attacking the pathogen.
Okay.
And that causes severe brain inflammation, which causes symptoms like OCD, really rapid OCD, rage, severe separation anxiety, tics, lots of other different things like different skills in handwriting and math, so deterioration and a lot of things, behavioral changes, bedwetting, sleep disturbances. So the whole gamut of just like what is happening to my kid.
So this kind of all came on at once.
Yeah, it all kind of, and I would
That's
say like
terrifying,
a month
Kelly.
before. It was terrifying.
You're like, this is not my child.
100%. And there was a moment where I was like, my child is not here right now.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was, I'd say like a month of like, kind of like interesting behaviors happening. Like I remember specifically like he needed his waffle cut a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, he's just being picky and he's like getting older and like, I don't know, digging his heels in on stuff. Right. Like, and he was always like, I don't know, had a few like little specific tendencies, but it just became so severe. Like I won't touch that waffle. It is not in the strips or whatever it was. And it got more things and more things like this. And then he'd want to repeat things or he'd want me to repeat things. And it got to the point where Chris and I started researching autism.
Okay.
Because he would do this like stimming and this like rubbing of his arms in an interesting way. And we're like, God, did we miss something?
Yeah.
Do we have a kid with autism we didn't even know and nobody else knew? And so you just start researching everything. And it was a really scary like week, I would say, of like things just really quickly, rapidly changing. And then it was almost like overnight. It was about 95% of our day was like Asher's OCD and these like weird out of character tendencies. He'd have to like do this if you touched him. He'd have to wipe it off a certain way. He'd have to repeat things. He'd have to go up and down the stairs a certain amount of times. Like it was OCD on steroids within 2 days.
Wow.
And it got to the point where he would just be sitting and like sobbing and rocking in his room. I mean, I took videos at the time and I can hardly look back at them without like completely losing it.
Yeah.
A lot of it you block out, but he was incredible. I mean, I did not know who he was. I did not know what was going on.
Right. And I'm sure as a mom too, I mean, it's scary.
Yeah.
To see them struggling and you don't know how to fix it or what's happening.
Completely.
Especially in your case when it happens so fast.
Yeah.
And then the other, as you're describing what he's going through, and especially just this image of him rocking, it's like he's also a prisoner in his own body and his own
100%.
mind. And that is
I
like,
nailed it.
ugh,
Yeah.
that is gutting.
And it's like they almost know they know it's happening, but they're not aware,
don't know
like
how
in
to
the
stop
moment,
it.
and I don't know how to stop it. I remember him saying, like, what is happening to me? And why won't it stop? Make it stop, you know? And so it's terrifying. And so it took a couple days until we're like, okay. At the time and he still does, he is seen at Children's in the immunology and infectious disease department because of his other diagnosis. And so we called them and just said, like, could this be tied to an infection? Like, any idea? And they're like, you got to go to the ER. It could be a brain tumor is what they kind of said. Like, it, you know, it sounds really serious. This like really quick reaction. Nobody said PANS. Nobody like threw that out at all.
Is it very common? I have not really heard of it until like a few years
It's rare,
ago.
but yet it's becoming more
Medical
more
professionals
common.
should know this
they should know
now.
about it. And I think slowly it's getting more attention. But that's just because of moms who are speaking out and having to be mama bears through all of this. But it definitely, I don't even know the statistics. I'm definitely not an expert in all of it, but it's a little less rare than I think some of these other rare things that Asher's been through.
Sure.
So at the time, we went to the ER and they ran every test possible. We had to wait like 8 hours for an MRI because you can't like eat or drink. And so it was just this like 8 hours of him like basically going psychotic in the ER where you are like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? And no one really has an explanation. They did every blood test imaginable. They had to sedate him at one point because he was so irate. And at the end of it all, they basically were like, we don't know what's going on. And I had spent that 8 hours Googling like crazy, trying to figure out what it was. And I had a friend, years like before that, maybe even like a year before that's, you know, mentioned PANS, like that his kid might have that. And they were going through the work to figure out a diagnosis. So it was in my head. Like when I saw it, I just said like, wow, okay, I got to look into this. Rapid onset OCD. Because when you look it up, it will say that.
Okay.
And that was completely what happened. And so I started researching it more. And this amazing nurse I talked to was walking him out of the MRI. I'm 100%. Like, I just like looked at her and she, you know, came by me and she goes, I think he has PANS. And I'm like, so do I.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you for saying something.
Yes.
Right. And so nobody, you know, no other doctor called it out, but we did mention it to one and they said, well, here's who you should contact. And it was someone at the Masonic Institute. And so we had some contacts and we got to work. So basically we were just like sent home with a kid who we didn't recognize.
And then you have to
really
wait
terrifying.
until you can get an appointment.
Yeah. And that's usually months. And so luckily the doctor there at the time like emailed us and said, wow, this really does sound like that. I can see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Or whatever that was. And then we also went to the Masonic Institute of the Developing Brain and we saw a psychiatrist there and she diagnosed him.
Okay.
And I had all the videos of everything. So I highly recommend if you have a kid who you don't know what's going on, video it.
Yeah.
It was really useful.
Yeah.
And I kept really good timelines of everything that happened according to like the illnesses and everything and the symptoms that came. And so through those videos and her just observing him and then understanding all the things that transpired, she diagnosed him that day with PANS.
And so how was that when you hear the diagnosis? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, I think like it's almost probably validating in some way because you have an answer. But tell me, like, what do you remember feeling or thinking in that moment?
For sure. I think I was like, I know this is what my kid has.
Yeah.
And I think so many moms go through that and are not as lucky as we are and spend months to years trying to figure out what their kid has and with doctors and professionals telling them no. Because a lot of kids don't look completely textbook like Asher. We were lucky. He really did. He was like the textbook case of how a panda's diagnosis can come about. So we had, it was completely like, okay, but also like, oh my God, like this is what my child has. Like now what? And you know, he was 4. He was so small and it was so terrifying. And he, you know, couldn't really understand what was going on. His brother at the time was 7 and he, you know, could kind of understand it, but like, it was terrifying. His brother changed overnight.
Yeah.
You know, and that was incredibly terrifying for him too and really hard to deal with. Yeah. Our whole family got turned upside down.
Right.
Like
overnight. Your focus shifts
completely
to Asher because
which already it was kind of in a way, right? From his other diagnoses, but those didn't affect him behaviorally. Yeah. It was stuff you couldn't see. If you saw Asher, you would never think he had anything before. And then once this happened, you could kind of like, okay, something's going on with that kid, right? Behaviorally. So that was really hard. But after that, I think what quickly happened is he got put on antibiotics, which he was actually on for a while for his other condition and was off him for a while. And that's when the PANS kind of came out, which was really interesting.
Okay.
So antibiotics are also prophylactically used in PANS to help reduce inflammation.
Interesting.
Which also, then you think about all the things it's doing inside as well. So it's like this battle of trying to fix these kids. So he was put on that helped a little bit, which was a sign like, okay, that's definitely what this is. He was put on ibuprofen when he's in a flare. So they might be on ibuprofen for 11 weeks, which is also really rough on their liver. And their gut.
Like this is,
it's
you know
all
me,
the
I
things
have
that
all
come-
these,
yes.
I will dissect all my health issues throughout the course of this podcast at times, but the gut health is something.
Oh, it's huge. So and then how does that affect your mind, right?
Right.
And
Yes.
so
The gut brain connection.
all connected.
Yes.
So
you're treating one. And it's impacting the other.
Exactly. And so that's like
cycle.
Horrible too when you're a mom who, I feel like I've been on my own health journeys too. And I've really come back to health and wellness and food and the gut as being like the key to so much. And so to give your kids these things or your child these things that are going to cause probably issues later in life is really hard.
Yeah.
But in the moment you will do anything because Asher was not himself. He couldn't go to school. He had, separation anxiety that was so strong. I couldn't leave the room without him. Like mom, rage that was out of control. I mean, we are lucky he was young.
Yeah.
And it still continues. Don't get me wrong. It's still happening. But to the point where like you'd have to like give him, a safety hold and you'd have to hold him. He would go after his brother a lot. It was a lot of aggression towards his brother. We all had, marks and cuts from a lot of that. He would throw things. He would, like take his hand across the counter and throw everything down. I mean, what was happening in our home was so crazy.
Yeah.
And it is so hard to really explain it to people. And so, we got through that. He slowly started improving. And I think there's so many things. We started going to therapy. That was really hard because he was 4.
Right.
And I think really therapy can be a really great thing for these kids who are a little bit older.
Did you just do talk therapy or were there
It was like play therapy.
Okay.
Yep. And it was like, cognitive behavioral therapy is what it's called. And so that was, interesting. I think what we learned from that is like, he was so flared and he was so, it was so hard for him that it was almost making it worse. So we took him out of that. And then Chris and I started seeing somebody that specializes in PANS and that was amazing. So that was like us having an outlet to say, how can we help Asher?
Yeah.
And realizing so much of it wasn't really about teaching Asher the things. It was teaching us how to handle him and how to be there for him. And so that's where I think we started getting some momentum. After that, we were introduced to a doctor. His name is Dr. Irestone. He's been amazing. He does immunotherapy, kind of homeopathy stuff. Homeopathy is a big way that a lot of these kids get help.
Okay.
And get better.
What is how do you say it? What is
homeopathy?
What does that mean?
So I'm not an expert on it either, but it's giving a little doses of something that can then help cure you.
Okay.
And so Asher is now going through that process.
So it's like a naturopath sort of? Okay.
Completely. Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And so he's going through where we found out all his triggers, that was like mycoplasma, I think, and strep and Lyme's and all these things that he had in his body that his body was trying to fight that we're slowly trying to repair. And so we're basically what it does is get to the root of the problem.
Okay.
And it's really slow. Yeah. And it can be really hard. Mm-hmm. And it can trigger all of the same things when you treat it. And so it's very time consuming.
So you almost have to take a step backwards to go forward.
Yep.
Is it treatable or curable?
It's not curable, but it's treatable.
Okay.
Yep. And so PANS, there's a lot of medical interventions. There's the antibiotics, the ibuprofen, sometimes steroid bursts are used to really quickly decrease inflammation. And there's also something called IVIG, which is intravenous immunoglobulins that are put in to children's bodies. And then that actually really can help a lot of them. Mm-hmm. We have not had to do that. That is a really long process to get approved through insurance.
Okay.
There's not a lot of places to go. And I know it's a battle to do it. We're fortunate that what we're doing right now has at least gave him enough of, I think, it's reduced his symptoms enough that we're still continuing on the path we're going. Yeah. But that's what a lot of people end up having to do.
And does insurance cover any of that when you go the natural path? Yeah.
No, none of it. And so it's not for, not everyone's even able to do it.
Right.
But it's been amazing. Yeah. To watch, I would say the hardest part about PANS is this constant up and down. And you just never know what your kid, you don't know who you're waking up to sometimes.
Sure.
You don't know what's going to set them off.
Yeah.
You don't know when something's going to cause them to have a flare. When they have a flare, it's basically increased inflammation in the brain. They can last anywhere from like 6 to 12 weeks. And so it's like, oh, you're sick, and here we go.
Yeah.
Here's a couple bad months. Buckle up. And so that up and down can get really hard, because then you'll have like, I can remember we went on this trip to Arizona, and he was like so good. And I just remember like, he's back.
Yeah.
That's Asher, right? And then you get home and you get sick at school, and you're like, and here we go again. And so it's this constant like up and down that you really just have to learn to ride the waves, which is like parenting in general, right?
Yeah.
Like it really is, but it's just really intense.
But that's, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very intense.
Very intense. So I feel like the ups and downs have been a little bit more, you know, the waves are a little bit smaller. They're not as intense. So the fall isn't as strong. And that's what we've seen in Asher. So he still has a lot of the same symptoms. They're nowhere near where they were when he first got sick. And so, I mean, the biggest thing I think when I was in that, I mean, it was a good year of like, oh my gosh. It's really important to know like kids will get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that there is hope.
Yeah.
And that there is like, it is so hard, but like you will get through it.
Oh, I mean, it's so interesting because from what my interactions with you, you just have like a calming presence to you, and you're super sweet and thoughtful. How do you maintain that?
Oh,
and
that's
channel that? Like I could be a yeller.
Oh, so can I. Yeah.
Like
that
I
has been
lose
huge.
patience, especially when I'm anxious.
Right.
When my anxiety is high, I definitely project that.
Yep.
And I mean, even this morning, I was like running around the house, like, why am I the only one that sees the floor and needs to be vacuumed? I don't want to have to ask you to vacuum. I want you to see the dirt. Go get the vacuum, you know?
Never.
Like, stuff like that. And my husband's like, hang on.
Yes,
He's
exactly. Like,
before you start going down this list of things that you don't think I do, let's talk about what I just did even just yesterday. You know, and I know.
And that is so me too. So don't, I think that, I mean, that leads to a really good point, as I think, you know, I talked a little bit about the therapy and like doing that with Chris and doing that as a family really helped us. But like what I realized through all of this is how much my nervous system and my energy was important for him. Yeah. And so it was more like, oh, I can affect it. I can help it. I can bring it down or I can bring it up. Yeah. And that was a really big lesson for me. And I'm still working on it to this day, but I think he's been my biggest teacher to help me be able to do that. Yeah. And to really understand the importance of that. Yeah. For both of my kids. And so I think going through medical stuff like this, there's a lot of trauma, I think, for both the mom and the dad and the children.
And the other siblings.
And the other siblings. And that was a lot to get over, because Asher's stuff at 9 months was really, really hard. I mean, like, in a way, a lot harder than what we've had to go through lately, because it was like blood draw after blood draw and test after test and hospital stays.
And the fear, right? The fear
of like, are we leaving, and what's, just,
and being
so many
exposed
things.
to things, right?
Oh, completely. Yeah. It's like, COVID happened, and I'm like, oh, that's what we've been living for 3 years.
Right.
Like, yep. Oh. Yeah. And so that was really hard. But I think, you learn a couple things. One, you learn, like, I remember, a therapist telling me just, okay, like, I'm like, I have a lot of trauma. I can hardly drive by Children's without like having a panic attack sometimes. There was a point in my life where like I couldn't drive over there. And we had to go there for a big blood draw. And I was like, I'm so nervous. And I know how this is going to go. And, if you get a bad nurse or if you get a bad doctor, like all the questions. And I can remember her just saying, like, let's just, like, one, let's worry about your nervous system. Let's do some practices to like balance that. So I do that if we ever go to something, but also like talk to Asher about it and say like, we're going to have a hard couple minutes, but I got you and we're going to be okay. Yeah. And we're going to get through this. Yeah. And we're going to meet the nurse and we'll ask her name. And, just lots of tips. Yeah. So really being a medical advocate for your child is really important, and really like letting people know, like, he has some medical anxieties. You know what? I'm going to have to hold him when we do this blood draw. And I know that's not how you do it, but that's how we're going to have to do it today. Yeah. And if you can't, then we're going to find somebody else. Yeah. So a lot of just like really being strong in what you know is right for your child. Yep. And really being balanced in your own energy. And that can be hard. And that I work on every day. Yes. Yeah.
And I think, what's a really important message here that I'm hearing you say, Kelly, is like, and I, in my, not to this level, but in my way, have learned that this last year too, as we've had some behavioral stuff with my youngest as well. I think as moms, sometimes we don't put ourselves first because we are so focused on our children.
Yeah.
But to your point, and what I've learned as well is like, it's that old cliche saying of like, put your oxygen mask on first.
Yep.
And so if you're listening and you're having these challenges, I think the key takeaways here are also just like therapy for you.
Yes.
Open communication with your spouse, with your children.
Yep.
Doing all of the Zen things, carving out time to work out or to do yoga or to meditate or to do the sound baths or the massage, like whatever you need to do. That is not selfish. That is not selfish. That is your lifeline at the moment.
Completely. And I think that is the biggest gift I got through this was really understanding how much I needed some of those things throughout the course of motherhood, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not to downplay people's struggles. Like every child can be difficult and there's difficult moments, but when you're going through something this complex and difficult, like self-care is so important, and we usually do put ourselves last. And so figuring out how you put yourself first sometimes when you can.
Yep.
And knowing how much your energy impacts others.
Yeah.
Your husband, your child,
Yeah.
Everyone that you're around. And another big part of this too is, you kind of have alluded to this too. And I think this is something I just admire in you is your vulnerability. And that is what has got me through a lot of this.
Thank you.
Is being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
To others, to open up and share what goes on. So that people not only understand, but like oftentimes there is so many people that I have come in contact to, they're like, oh my gosh, I think my kid has that. Can I talk to you? Or I have a friend who is going through that. And so you don't find those people if you don't put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And that is something that has been just shown to me time and time again. I met a really amazing mom through all of this, whose child also has PANS. And she was like a lifeline for me. It was finding somebody. I wouldn't have found that if I wasn't vulnerable. Because I had told somebody in a business meeting and somehow it got back to somebody else. And now, then we were connected and went out to dinner and spent 3 hours talking about our children with PANS. And to have somebody, whatever you're going through, that gets it is so important.
Yes.
Because I've had friends that, by no fault of their own will say things like, oh yeah, my child has tantrums. I get it. Oh my gosh, here's what they did today. And I'm like, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea what we are going through. But when you have somebody who is walking that with you and they share your story, you're like, you see each other and you get it and you make each other see that like, we're going to be okay and we can figure this out. And she is like such a mama bear. She had so much research. She just had learned so much about it. And so was I. And so we have collaborated in a lot of ways to figure out how to help our kids. But I'd say like that vulnerability and finding your tribe is so important.
It is.
There's stuff
It
like
is.
this.
And I always say, I'm a chronic oversharer. Sometimes my husband will be like, he'll walk in as I'm doing like an Insta story. And he's like, why are you telling people this? I'm like, because you know what?
Yeah.
I know that I am not alone.
100%.
And
Yeah.
I like the foundation of my Instagram and of this podcast is I want people to feel less alone in their struggle.
Yeah.
I want to simply bring them joy, or I want to inspire them to think differently or take action. And the less alone in the struggle is such an impactful thing for people. It's just seeing themselves represented in someone else, or knowing that they're not alone, or they don't have to hide this or I'm sure there's some level of like embarrassment or shame.
Oh my gosh.
with that.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And I mean, I felt that from family members, of like, I can remember being like up at our cabin and like Asher just having a complete tantrum. And I can remember, like that judgment, that feeling of judgment of like, oh, what's wrong with that kid? And
Control your child.
and they're not doing anything about it. And I'm like, you have no idea.
Yes.
And like, we can't do that. Like, that's not how this is going to work with Asher, right? Like, it's really different. And so parenting looks really different with a kid with PANS.
Yeah.
And you often feel that like judgment from others. I pick up on things a lot from people.
Yeah.
And I read energy really like, to a fault.
Yeah.
And I'll just, and that was heartbreaking. But I had to just get over that and just say, it's not anything that these people mean. It's just, they don't understand. And in time, everyone I think has come around to be like, wow, like, this is different. And wow, Asher is special. And if we react like this, how much better he is versus this. And so I think that judgment and shame was really intense and really hard for a while and really isolating.
Yeah.
Very isolating.
Right.
Hard to go do things, hard to meet people and have play dates. And,
Right. So let's talk about that, because that is something that I always like. I had another mom on with her own journey, but I love to ask, like, how can we show up for you? So like, what are things that were maybe unintentionally hurtful that were said or done?
Yeah.
What are things that were helpful? Like, how can a community and friends or people you come across like really show up for someone who's going through this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one, Sometimes I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think, gosh, what I think about right away is just like Hunter through all of this and how hard it was on the sibling. And so a really big thing for anybody going through something like this is be there for the sibling. Mm-hmm. Offer to take them. Offer to have him for the night. Offer to take him to go do something fun. It really just like help his life feel more normal. Because at the, you know, if you're a mom with PANS or a dad with PANS, a kid with PANS, like it can often be hard to have that kid go with somebody else. It can be really hard for them and hard for the parent or the friend or whatever, or the family member. And so I think doing something for the sibling, it can be a really easy way for people to help out. I think also just, you know, offering to maybe do things that, you know, like maybe just household things or helping out with other things that you don't have time for anymore. Yeah. Because a lot of your energy and time is with the child and appointments and therapy and all the other things. So that can be really hard. Also just, you know, helping people find some time to go get away and have a normal life too. Yeah. Girlfriend's taking you out. Yeah. You know, listening and asking, how are you? Yep. Tell me more about it. Yeah. And not, I think I kind of alluded to that, but not like, oh yeah, my kid has this. And like trying to like share in a way that makes them feel like you're not listening to their struggles. But I think really just seeing it and being empathetic and wanting to understand more.
Yeah. I think we do that sometimes as a defense mechanism. We don't know what to say.
Completely. Yeah.
And we think we're being helpful by being like, oh yeah.
But it's like, oh no.
Or they try to problem solve.
Yeah. Problem solving can be really not helpful.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of people want to do that, especially with an illness like this. And a lot of it's like, oh, have you tried this? And you do this. And it's like, oh yeah, I spend my entire life thinking about this and researching it and diving into it. And not that that means I know everything. Right. Right. And so you have to be careful, like to still be willing to take advice and to allow people to provide insights to you. But it's really helpful when people just ask questions more. Yeah. Or listen to, I mean, like this, like, right? Like, so healing to just talk about it, right? and to describe it and hopefully helpful to somebody out there. Oh, I'm that sure says, you know, oh gosh, I think my kid's gone through this, or I have a friend whose kid has gone through this. Maybe now that helps me relate to them a little bit more on what they're going through. Yeah. And so, you know, there's so many struggles. I mean, there's school too. There's school stuff, right? Like, so there's a lot of, you know, things you need to ask for at school for supports or things to help them with accommodations to get through. And so a lot of times it's, you know, people just being aware and it's something so that people will listen. And
well, I think even too, like for Asher, just like making friends is probably more difficult.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Because at 6 or 4, they don't understand why their friend is mad all of a sudden.
Yeah. I mean, there was times Asher would walk into preschool and just, he swears a lot. That was something that came out when he was like 4 and he would use it correctly. And it's like, this is crazy.
But sometimes kind of funny.
But like, wow. Yeah. And he would just come in and swear and throw pencils in the preschool room. And it's like, whoa. Yeah. Right. And so that was hard. Yeah. And I think, like I said, like hard for him to find friends, but also hard to want to like build those friendships when you know your child might lash out. He's doing amazing. Good. He has so many friends. He is such a likable, lovable, fun guy. He still has his, you know, rage moments and his OCD stuff a little bit. But he's so fun and he's doing great. I mean, he's in sports. He's done amazing in school. He's had a really great teacher that really understood and saw that he had things that he needed to feel supported and, you know, okay. Yeah. In class. And so it takes the right people to really, I think, crowd around your child and give them support. That's another huge thing was, you know, I've had, you know, I'm blessed to have an amazing family and a lot of them really saw that like, you just need to really see Asher and let him know you see him. Yeah. You know,
that's so beautiful. Yeah.
So, I mean,
I also imagine, and did this change the dynamics with you and your husband? I'm sure in some way.
But how huge did it? Yeah. It's incredibly stressful. Yeah. I mean, it is so stressful to go through something like this. Both of your nervous systems are out of whack. Yep. You're always in fight or flight. I still have to work. I can always feel like I'm like bracing for, okay, who am I going to go see downstairs when I wake up? Ashley used to wake me up in the middle of the night, just hitting me and screaming at me. And I'd be like startled in the middle of the night. And that kind of stuff, just like your nervous system isn't balanced and Chris's wouldn't be either. And so we'd just be quick to, you know, get upset about things. But I think what's also hard about it is there's so many different avenues and ways you can go to treat PANS. And that can be hard because maybe I think one way and Chris thinks another way. And what we really had to, I think, figure out through that and continue to do is understand we both have this like gut instinct for things and to listen to those. And for me to be respectful of his and him to be of mine and be like, we are both like feeling things for a reason. And so like, for an instance, one thing I didn't mention is like, there was a point where a lot of kids end up getting their tonsils out. which is very interesting. And it actually helps. And so Chris was like, I think we should do this. And I'm like, no. Not going to do this. Right. And so that was where, in an instant where I feel like my gut was like maybe not listening because I didn't want to go through it. Right. Because it seemed horrible.
Yeah.
And like, and so finally I think I got to the point after doing a lot of other things, like, okay, let's explore that. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that's listening, and being there together and really giving space for each other to kind of collaborate and figure out how to solve it together and be a team. I mean, I really do think it's brought us closer. Our whole family's closer. I mean, our ability to be empathetic towards others. I really think of Hunter and all he's seen and had to go through, and his ability to be empathetic towards others as your strength and ability to just like be so strong through everything he's been through. But yeah, I'd say it's made Chris and I a closer team,
which is amazing because I know that is not always the case.
No, completely here.
I think
it's a rough road, but
I love that you guys chose to do therapy together.
Yeah,
I think we all know in any relationship, communication is key, right? Yeah. And my husband and I have very different communication styles.
Same. Yep.
And so I love that you guys chose to go down that path.
Yeah. So that was really helpful. Yeah. Very helpful. And like the tonsil part too, just to a plug.
So he had his taken out.
So he had his taken out. Tremendous improvement.
Wow.
So that was actually a really big piece that I forgot to mention is that was really life-changing. Sleep-wise, he slept so much better. He had like a sleep apnea basically. And so when he'd get sick, his airways would be so constricted and he would get, if he got strep or anything else, it would just be so detrimental to his sleep that was causing his brain to have issues too. So tonsils removed was really great. It's not for everybody, but it does end up being something that does work for some kids. So that was something I had to, like the more medical stuff, I'm always more hesitant for.
Yeah.
And the more naturopath stuff, I'm more like, I jump in. And so Chris and I together make a really good team because you kind of have to look at all of it for pans.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Gosh, I am so in awe of you, Kelly, and just how you've navigated this. We do have to be mama bears, right?
Really
we have to advocate for our kids.
Yep.
And I think the fact that you really took this on while also managing all of the other things, you're so aware of how this is impacting everyone in your family and how you can help. It's really incredible. And I know this is going to help people. One thing I want to do is make sure in the show notes, we will include the names of some of the people that you mentioned, the medical staff here that's been really helpful, like a starting point. And I'm sure, Kelly, you would be open if anybody did want to reach out.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing about the PANS community. Everyone does really want to help. There is a really great Facebook support group as well, the Minnesota PANS Facebook group that was so impactful to be a part of. I'm not super active on it.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who are. But for me, when I had a question, I could research and plug in the name of a doctor or something I was going through, and there'd be a thread of helpful information. And I will say, like, that has been my number one place for information. So very active, very supportive.
Okay.
A really great place to start. I also bought every book on Amazon and, everything possible. I think there's been articles and stories. There's lots of people in the community that are out there to reach out to. So I think there's been a lot of movement and a lot of awareness since Asher even got this diagnosis. So lots out there. But yeah, always happy to talk to someone too.
Great. We'll make sure to include a whole list of all these resources in the show notes.
Yes.
So go there. Well, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing your story. I know it is going to be impactful, and I love just getting to know more about you on a personal level and your family. And I can see why your kids are so wonderful, because you and Chris both have just a really kind, true, genuine heart. And
thank you.
And just a passion for giving back to the community and others. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you. I mean, and same goes for you. I think that's why obviously we've worked together year after year through all of this. And so it's been so fun to watch everything you're doing and to watch how close our synergies are between the things that we are passionate about. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And stay tuned for 12 Moms of Christmas coming up this year. We will definitely be plugging it on the podcast and how you can help and how you can be a part of it, because it really is an incredible organization.
Yeah, incredible. And I'd say the best distraction I had in my life year over year through all of this was this 12 Moms, because while we have hardships, we are so fortunate to be able to have the resources to help Asher through all that stuff. And I feel so grateful. And so sometimes you just see people going through this and you realize, like, it's not like that feeling of like, oh, someone has it worse than me. It's just like, we are all in this and we are all fighting things and we are all on our own path to try to be the best, humans that we can be. Yeah. So it is one of the best things I'm a part of year after year. So thank you.
And coming in the holidays too, it just puts so much in perspective.
It really does. So
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.